This week, here on Mastering Dungeons, our main topic, we will continue to look at Draw Steel. We will look at montages and negotiations, two of the main new subsystems that Draw Steel introduces.
And also a famous Paul Simon song.
It's true. They're often mistaken for one and the same.
Yeah.
Yes. So to set the table here early, a couple Saturdays ago, Teos and I played the introductory adventure called The Road to Broadhurst as part of Tom Christie's D20 Play channel. Joining us in the game were DM David, Will from This Effing DM, and Mauricio. And Teos and I talked last week about sort of first impressions and playing a first level character in Draw Steel, particularly around the combat options and the creation of the characters and how they interacted. After combat, the first combat in this Road to Broadhurst game, so here come spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled on the Road to Broadhurst, check back in with us in a couple weeks after you've played. Here we go. We played a montage and then a negotiation. So this week, in our continuing look at games other than D&D, we want to continue to look at Draw Steel. The standard disclaimer, here we go. We like this game. We want to know if we love this game. Everything that we talk about here, even if it sounds critical, is done strictly from the point of wanting to look at game design, role-playing game design, tabletop role-playing game design, and some of the challenges of it, how to make it work, what things work at the table and don't in the rules, or work in the rules but don't at the table. We want to check all of these things out. So we're not bashing the game.
I want to add that Keith Amon posted on his blog a neat article about critique, and there are a lot of great points. You should find his blog and check it out. But one of the things there was the idea that you're not trying to say, is this good or bad? Like that's someone's perspective, and anybody could disagree on that. But rather to investigate it, and we're learning as we analyze it. Hopefully you're learning as you think about our analysis. We don't have to agree at all. That's definitely not the point. It's in fact encouraged to disagree in various ways. But by analyzing this thing, we're all learning something together in our own different ways, which will lead to our play being better, our GMing being better, our design being better. And that's the point of all this.
Yep, there we go. So with spoilers on, here we go, talking about the free adventure Road to Broadhurst. So we're going to talk about montages and negotiations. Before we talk about what happened in the adventure, let's talk about what the rules of Draw Steel say about each of these things. We'll start with montages. This is the opening paragraph in that section. When a group of heroes works together over time to accomplish a common goal that requires more than a single characteristic, the director can call for a montage test. Such tests typically take place over a prolonged period and focus on collective or shared activities. Navigating a vast desert, convincing farmers to rise up against a tyrannical leader, and performing a ritual to open a magically sealed gate can all be accomplished with montage tests. Montages are meant to be cinematic, not just mechanical. This is according to the rules. There should be a time pressure involved, as well as stakes for success or failure. If you are not doing something that has a time pressure and there isn't stakes for success or failure, you probably shouldn't bother with a montage. Right. And then one more paragraph here. The rewards and consequences of individual tests made during a montage test are handled on an individual basis. The director can use the default of gaining additional malice in the next combat encounter for consequences and having the party gain hero points for rewards to keep the montage moving. So I wanted to get at least those two things in there as the introduction, and then as a little bit about consequences and rewards for individual tests within a montage test.
Yeah, and I think most folks who've had some experience in role-playing games will say, hey, that sounds a lot like skill challenges in D&D 4th edition, and that's exactly right. Like it's filling that kind of design space and that kind of play experience. trying to come up with a revitalized way to do, scratch that itch and that gameplay function where you have this an issue that needs to be resolved in some way, and it will take time and it will take the whole party doing it, and let's see how they do it, right? Making it through a wilderness that is dangerous, trying to navigate through a storm, those kinds of things, those can all be montages.
Mhm. And so I want to talk next about negotiation,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll come back and
Okay,
handle each one individually.
cool.
So, negotiation, according to the rules, are the following. Think of negotiation as something like learning a new system for combat exploration or investigation in an RPG. This set of rules provides a framework for role playing. The negotiation rules are meant to be read by players and directors so that both understand the rules of negotiation. So we've gone from montages being okay, we want these to be cinematic, not just mechanical, right? We want it to play out as if you were watching a movie
Mm-hmm.
and you see each of the characters doing a different thing. And we see this in movies, right? Like
Yeah.
heist movies, or even I think in the D&D movie, it showed that they were getting ready to rob the stagecoach type
Right.
thing, and it showed everyone doing their different parts
Absolutely.
before it all
Yeah.
came together.
Yeah.
So you can see what they want to happen in a
Mm-hmm.
montage. In the
Mm-hmm.
negotiation, it says know the rules. This is
Mm-hmm.
a new system. Uh, Now it sets a framework for role playing, but you need to know this system,
Mm.
players, before you engage with this. And the montages don't say that. Uh,
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, at first blush, they're very similar, and I almost asked myself, or did ask myself, why are they different? And what it is that negotiation have these additional pieces, as we'll look at,
mhm,
that are meant to represent a very particular type of, let's call it a montage, right? Like we would think, like in fourth edition, a skill challenge could be, and in fact, the bad example in the book was talk to the king about something and prove your,
mhm,
win their support for something. So it was a skill challenge that was, in essence, a negotiation. Here they're saying no,
mhm,
negotiations are different because I think they're
mhm,
trying to say beyond what you would do in a montage, there's additional rules work required to support, say, the Lord of the Rings with the idea of getting approval to go and take the ring to Mordor.
mhm,
Or, wandering through the forest and you run into the elves. Do the elves let you through, as we will discuss further, right? That there's this
mhm,
additional piece, and you want to lean into what the different sides are thinking, and in particular, the side you're trying to win over, that the PCs are trying to win over.
mhm. Yeah. I only want to contrast these two things so I can contrast them with the original implementation of skill challenges
Mm-hmm.
in 5e,
Mm-hmm.
which for many people were okay, this is cool. This is a good framework that I can use to help do certain things in the game that never had a framework before.
Yeah.
Then the other side was this is stupid. Why are you trying to tell me how to role play when role playing is a part of the game? It's an RPG, not a G. So I don't need to you to tell me how to do this. Let me
Mm-hmm.
just play it out. And so there is this already before we even look at negotiations and montages. There is this tension between two different
Sure.
kinds of play styles, and for some, trying to do any sort of framework on top of any of this is already a fool's errand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, and they have a point to a point. uh, that if this does replace straight up role playing
Mm-hmm.
for a group that wants to do straight up role playing, then it is something that is just needlessly complicated and frustrating and to be jettisoned. Now,
Yeah.
if you aren't that strict role playing above all, and I don't want to make dice rolls when I'm negotiating or when I'm doing other things that don't really interact with the rules, then these are great. And these can be a very fun game. They can be a great framework to enhance role playing. But you need to recognize where you are on that
Sure,
continuum
sure.
before you dive into what these things actually do and how they're used.
Yeah, and I just want to say that sometimes this is set up as a false dichotomy,
Hmm.
where the idea is that previous to skill challenge, the world was this fabulous, perfect way of playing, and then
Right.
these skill challenge rules become this shackle that destroy my good game. And I think of two things. One is recently somebody shared Gary Gygax's instructions. I think it might be even in the AD&D DMG about
Hmm.
how your NPCs should just constantly mess with the players and foil them. And
Yeah.
it really what it shows you is in Gary's mind, you couldn't just have a discussion with an NPC because the
Hmm.
NPC's function was to mess with you and undermine
Right.
you and challenge you constantly, but not in a fun way, like just thwart you.
Hmm.
And literally providing instructions on how to do that, right? So play could be really problematic when you're trying to just do anything with an NPC in a negotiation format. It often wasn't fun. The other point I think of is third edition adventures, where you saw these organized play adventures, follow a format over and over and over again. And what it
Hmm.
would be is, you go through the wilderness. Now here is this one example of the hazards you faced that is going to
Hmm.
really hurt. And it was often very dissatisfying of just how much damage did you take to prove the point that something is dangerous.
Hmm.
Or it was the door that you must get through or the king you must negotiate with, and really only one character is any good at. So everybody else checks
Hmm.
out while this one character is good at, possibly
For
usurped
sure.
by the bard who was even better, made the roll. I'm a master diplomat. Well, yeah, well, I'm the bard, so I'm just better anyway. I'll make the roll. And then if they rolled a
Yep.
one, you all wondered how to handle this because it was so absolutely embarrassing that obviously this person should make a great point. And all of these arguments, but I said these words that are so good, they were all still alive back then, right?
Hmm.
And that's why I think you can't just pretend like it was perfect before.
For
And
sure.
all tools are an attempt to move forward in some way because of all those historical imperfections.
Right. And good game masters, as far back as OD&D, were doing something like a skill challenge, a montage, right? They
Mhm.
were thinking ahead. They were putting together a framework of how do I engage all my players in this particular thing?
Mhm.
And what are some of the outcomes? What are some of the
Mhm.
consequences that I can put onto the party for success or failure? So this is just this being skill challenges and now montages and negotiations are just sort of a concretization of this framework that many people have used for years anyway.
Yeah, yeah, good point.
All right. So let's talk negotiations here. What are the rules for a negotiation? During the negotiation, the director assigns the NPC or NPCs four temporary statistics and features: interests, patience, motivations, and pitfalls. Heroes can then try to make deals, make arguments, bring up topics that will increase the interest for the NPCs without draining their patience. And you do so by mentioning motivations or assessing motivations and avoiding pitfalls. So that's the structure. You're trying to increase this one thing, decrease the other,
Yeah.
while touching on one and avoiding the other. Uh, it makes perfect logical design sense to do
Mhm.
something this way. If you had to distill it down, this is one of the simplest ways you could do it
Mhm.
while still making it relatively interesting in a mechanical way.
Yeah, and interest is rated from 0 to 5. Patience is rated from 0 to 5. Um, if you have a language in common, this increases their patience by 1. Um, each NPC has at least two motivations that you can appeal to. And then pitfalls are those areas that are going to be no-nos if you bring it up, right? I mean, we all have in-laws or family where this is true, right? And we can directly borrow from that. Mention this one thing and it all derails. And so that represents that. But that might be quite hard to figure out, as we found in our play.
For sure. And then the rules talk about learning things about the NPCs or the situations outside of the negotiation, which I had been thinking about. The issue is that in all the play tests I've done, the negotiations are taking place immediately. You don't have time to step outside the negotiation to research the NPC, because the book talks about, well, if you find their diary and you could read their diary, you would know all of their motivations and all. But it's not like you walk up to the guards, they say halt, who goes there, why should we let you in? You don't have time to say, oh, time out, hang on, I'm going to rush to the tavern and ask about you to learn what your motivations might be. So while it's good to mention that, I have not come up to a situation where that has actually been something that you could do. Uh, so I want to call that out because, I see why they put it in, but it's also sort of a false flag. It's sort of a red herring that you could do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a design opportunity. I thought this was actually kind of like this. I can think of, various adventures I've worked on, like Cloud Giant's Bargain, the ability to learn about the person that you will meet later, and then you'll have that confrontation. They also had a section where they talked about stopping combat and starting negotiation, that you can make a maneuver to make a hard presence test or some applicable test to stop combat and start a negotiation. And I thought, well, does that mean you can't have a negotiation during a combat? And maybe you can't because the pace is different, but that's actually, in the Adventure Cloud Giant's Bargain, you would want to do it simultaneously, but maybe that's not supposed to happen or it'd get complicated. I'd need to go back and read the rules and negotiation a little more carefully to know.
Yeah. Well, let's start with where we are now. So we've got what a montage is. We've got what a negotiation is. So let's look at it in terms of what we did when we played. And we'll also have to say here that obviously the game master, the director, has an important role in this because they must make snap judgments. They must make rulings based on rules that may or may not make sense. So with all of this that we're talking about, game masters will be an important part as well.
Which is good. I mean, you want that. If it weren't, then it would be a robotic system that, feels very cold. And so that judgment call comes in heavily, which is, I think, what makes skill challenges and montages fun, that you as DM, GM, director, feel empowered to tweak it. And, we've talked about in both last show and this show, the goals of the RPG, right? And I think this RPG Draw Steel is very good at telling you what the goals are, what they're trying to achieve. And so that's true in montages and negotiation as well, that they're trying to create a particular type of experience, which is cool.
Yep. So the montage that we took part in this adventure was called Days of Rain. We were traveling on this cart. We were guards escorting a cart full of medicine, full of goat medicine, to a town. And we got to a point where there was just days of rain. And so the scene is set for the director to read about the rain, about the road littered with debris, the horse is exhausted, trying to find dry spots to camp, spirits are low. One of the people you're escorting is hoping to gather some herbs along the way to help make more medicine. And then the wagon wheels break, and there's a farmer trying to get his cows across the road, and they're stuck in the road and they're not moving. So all of that sets the scene for then what the characters will be able to do by taking on challenges within the montage. Uh, so there are different levels of tests, and you could have as many as needing to get like 7 successes before you get 3 failures.
Mhm.
In this case, it was a uh, for 5 heroes, which there were for us. You needed to get 5 successes before you got 5 failures.
Mhm.
And it calls out in the adventure the challenges that you can undertake
Mm.
based on what we heard in setting the scene. So, find shelter is one of the challenges, rally the horses, forage for herbs, deal with the cows, fix the wheel, clear some fallen trees, or raise everyone's spirits.
Mhm.
And you, as the players, can then take on one of those challenges and make a test to see if you succeed. uh, Characteristics and skills are suggested for each of them. So for find shelter, they talk about characteristics of reason and intuition being important, and skills of nature, navigate, or search being important.
And in a montage test, you generally are just each character will take one task on.
Mhm.
An individual character should not do the same uh, task or check uh, over again. So if
Once
I
they succeed.
once they that's true, yeah. So once I
Yeah.
had foraged for herbs, which is what my character, my scion did, and I succeeded, then that's kind of closed off for me. I should do something else to help. Um,
Mhm.
and and a typical montage will go in 2 rounds. So everybody makes a check. We
Mhm.
finish the first round. Now the second round, everybody makes a check. In the book, they talk about how you could have an interlude in between those 2 rounds, which was kind of neat. So they gave the example of you're doing like racing across the desert to get to a town and warn of a coming army. And after round one, you might fight a giant, worm that emerges from the sand and attacks you all to just kind of change up the pace. And then you go into the continue the rest after that interlude.
Yeah.
Um,
I want to talk about that interlude for a
yeah.
second, because when you run something like this, people will look at their character sheet. They will say, well, I'm best at presence and entertaining or whatever. So let me do this. And they will just go first because they were like the first one to speak up.
Mhm.
And if you want this to be cinematic and if you want it
Mhm.
to be narrative, I think the best thing to do, and I don't know if this book calls it out, but add it to your best, your tip of how to run these, is do the one that would naturally occur first or have the biggest impact on other people going forward.
Right. So the
So,
broken wagon wheel, you'd probably want to take on, or the cows, but I went foraging for herbs pretty early on, and maybe that makes no sense cinematically, right?
right. But there may be different reasons, but like cheering everyone up might be the first thing,
Mm-hmm.
because that's going to affect possibly everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a way, even narratively, doesn't have to be mechanically, even narratively, to have one thing affect the others, do that first. So
Yeah.
if the cheering up success is successful, you can role play the people then going off to find herbs, the people going to deal with the cows. They're more cheerful. They might be
Yeah.
whistling a tune as they go.
Mm-hmm.
If that fails, then they may be dour, right? They may be, I
Yeah.
can't believe we sat there and listened to this guy strum his lute for 20 minutes and it sounded horrible. Right. Then it gives you a little bit more cinematic and narrative juice to play with rather than
Mhm.
just, I made my herb check. Now you go make the cow check.
Yeah. Yeah. I've often, some of my favorite skill challenges have been ones where there is a scene, a series of scenes and things for people to contribute to. So things like, let's say you're going through that desert and you reach a cliff face. How do we scale down? And then one character will step up and help that, and now that is a success. on the
Mhm.
trip to scale down as everybody's helped that. And that's something everybody can visualize as they climb down with the help of this character. And then we get to, say, a rickety bridge, and someone else helps with that. And then we have an area that's a field of dangerous cacti that can attack if
Mhm.
they're awoken. They'll shoot out tendrils and bind you. What do we do there? And someone figures that out. That to me is very cinematic
Mhm.
versus if everybody just takes turns just giving a list of things.
Yeah.
It can be cinematic if the players are doing the equivalent of that, but they often won't.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And I agree with what you're saying. The risk you run then by making it discrete,
Mm-hmm.
time has passed things, is that one person may end up doing everything.
Right.
And it's awkward to say, well, you
You
did the
can't.
last thing. So even though you know the most about cactus and your background is cactus master,
Yeah,
you did the last thing. So you can't do this thing.
it's true.
Um, so that's why you have to carefully plan these in order to
Mm-hmm.
avoid something like that happening.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting comparing these montage tests when it comes to voyages, which is they're not just for voyages, but to something like the Lord of the Rings or the One Ring system, which has a very different way of approaching travel specifically rather than montage tests.
Mhm.
It has separate rules for a negotiation,
Mhm.
a and a trip, traveling across, which is interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so once you have chosen the challenge that you're going to take, you make your test, and the test is the same rolling of the 2d10 and adding your characteristic and your
Mm-hmm.
skill if it applies to the roll. So 11 plus is, or 11 or less is one thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? 12
Yeah.
to
Tier one,
16
tier two,
is
tier three.
tier
Yeah.
2, and then tier 3. Uh, and the interesting part about the montage test in this adventure is I don't see that called out
Mm.
anywhere. So as far as I can tell, you would have to go back and read the montage test rules in the rule book to figure out what you rolled and what it means if you deal with the cows.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where this difference between negotiation and montage is important, and you'll have to get that experience. And we should say this came up a lot in comments to our last video. So this adventure that we played, Road to Broadhurst, is meant for new players but experienced
Mhm.
directors. The
Yeah.
other adventure, which Shawn had a hand in, is meant for new DMs to learn the
Mhm.
ropes, right? So,
Yeah.
because some folks said, why did you start with this one? Well, Tom's actually, our DM, our director, is quite good at running Draw Steel. So he didn't
Mhm.
need a new adventure for new DMs, but we were new players, and that is exactly what this is meant for, right? So he had these rules in mind, and yeah. Um,
Mhm.
so each character takes their turn. They can, one thing that's different from a group test, which this game also has, is in a group test
Mhm.
you can't assist. You're all doing, say, hiding to get across, to sneak across an area. Here you can assist, and that's something that I think we didn't have a feel for, that we could have done that, right?
Mhm.
When you assist, again, you have the 3 tiers. If you fail, you get a bane -2 on the character. The character you're trying to help gets a bane -2. If you get tier 1, you grant them an edge +2.
Mhm.
And tier 3 is a double edge, which means their result will be a tier higher.
Mhm.
You can't use the same skill twice, but other characters can use that skill. Usually, a character can't do the same task twice, but some montages may allow a certain number of tests for the same topic. So, if you're all climbing up a mountain, there may be a number of hazards to deal with, but climbing might be something that lots of people can do because, or a certain number of times to represent the climb. So it
Mhm.
depends on the exact story. You can substitute a magic item or ability if that would accomplish a goal. They gave the example of if you're trying to navigate a ship and a character has a magic fan that creates wind, the director might grant 2 automatic successes for that character and say, "You're done. You just used the fan. Totally succeeds twice. Good job. You did your thing."
Mhm.
The director can introduce new challenges. So, if you're climbing that wall, all of a sudden there could be birds to deal with or some other hazard, and that gets revealed and makes it interesting to suddenly have a different thing that opens up line. Now you can use this skill because this new challenge has appeared. And the whole time the director's counting total successes and failures to see which you reach first.
Mm-hmm. And so there are three kinds of outcomes in a montage test. There's the total success, which means you have gotten more successes than failures in the allotted time and setup. There's partial success, um, where you do have more successes than the failures, but you are within the threshold of, I think, within two, they say, of the failures to the successes. So
Yeah.
you succeed, but not fully. And then there's total failure, where you hit the failure limit before you hit the success limit.
Yeah. So it's
And in our case,
if either you
right?
hit the failure limit or time runs out,
Yeah,
and you have two more successes than failures, then that's a partial success. So you ran out of time,
right.
or you hit the failures, but you
Yeah,
actually had a good number of successes, just not enough. Then that's partial.
yeah, yeah. So in our case, the successes, the total success means that we get a victory for completing this, and the wagon now carries two more crates of this medicine. Um, and it's funny though, because my question is, what if nobody foraged for herbs? Uh,
Yeah, if you
you
just
just
fixed the wheel
find
and
them.
dealt with the
Yeah,
cows, you magically end up with
right.
more. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That is
but
part of the difficulty of writing these
I,
kinds of things. And yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
A partial success is you gain one crate, but every hero loses a recovery, or the wagon takes 5 damage. And total failure is the wagon loses a crate, uh, or the wagon takes 5 damage, and each hero loses 1 recovery. So,
Yeah.
it's at least there, the consequences are mechanical,
Hmm.
which is something for the game side of things. You want to have a consequence be worthwhile for the players to take
Yeah.
the time and expend the resources to do it.
How did you feel when we went through this scene? How did you like it? What did you feel as sort of as a player?
I felt exactly like I feel about skill challenges. Um, and now I would need to run this more. I would need to read more examples. I would need to see if this is an upgrade on the
Mhm.
skill challenges that we saw for fourth
Mhm.
edition. Um, I like role playing, and I like the smaller sort of interplay of checks and characters. So that's why I suggested having something that one person does affect what other people do, right?
Yeah.
If the person dealing with the cows fails, I don't just want it to fail. I want it to affect the people who are looking for shelter, because now, as they're searching the forest, these cows are running past them
Yeah.
and disrupting them, right?
Well, and that
Um,
is a benefit of this system, as if I'm recalling correctly for montages, you resolve each check as it happens
right.
fully. So you're not just like
Yep.
you're not just counting like successes and failures and nothing happens. It's your character does a thing. I resolve as director your success or failure, which could have
Mhm.
implications and story
Sure.
feel and whatever. Then I'm also tallying it, and the next person goes, kind of thing.
And for sure. And I would have loved that to be in the actual text of the right. If they choose to rally the horse first
Mm-hmm.
and succeed, blank. If they choose to rally the horse first but fail, do this. And so
Mm-hmm.
have that interplay. Give the director some cinematic options to show
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
things succeed or when
Mm.
things fail.
Mm. Yeah, that's neat. I like that. Yeah, I mean, I like this system,
Mhm.
if only because it makes you as director think about all these things
Yeah.
and consider how you want it. My favorite skill challenges were the ones that definitely felt like they you could almost say a thing you would often hear. People's favorite skill challenges were the ones where they weren't sure it was a skill challenge. It's
Mm-hmm.
something you often heard,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Because it had a structure and motivations and goals, but you were lost in that scene and play.
Mhm.
And that's the thing that I think where this system as set up as fully written doesn't automatically do that,
Right.
which is kind of too bad. It would be neat
Yeah.
if it could do that. Now, it is
Mhm.
mechanical fun, so maybe that's okay for the
Right.
majority of groups because it gives you this, everybody gets to play the game, everybody gets a
Mhm.
possible chance at a trophy, and
Yep.
and there's rewarding interconnection and storytelling is being done. But
Mhm.
if you want that to be a smoother experience, then you will have to become accomplished at doing
Yep.
this so that that is the outcome. I think.
And that's why we need examples of it presented
Hmm.
both in writing and in video
Yeah.
form. And
Yeah.
the most fun I had running a skill challenge was literally the first one I ran. And it was Chris Tulak's Adventure Escape from Sembia,
Hmm.
where all the guards are out looking for you. If they spot you and catch you, there's no fighting your way out of it. There's dozens of guards in your first level. So you have to avoid being captured. And they didn't know what a skill challenge was because this was before the rules came out. So I'm just describing scenes, both what Chris had written and then things I was making up on the fly because they scattered in different directions. So I'm like, okay, what happens? What do you do? Okay, this happens, that happens. And they weren't grabbed if they failed one check, but they got closer to being grabbed. And that's why we went forth and forth to different players and quick scenes of description and fun and laughing about the funny and
Yeah.
horrific and different things that were going on at the different with the different characters. But by the end, then I could say, well, as you wrap up, you are able to get through that gate as the guards come running up behind you, screaming, "Stop, close the gate, close the gate." But luckily, you had just enough success to all get through
Yeah.
as a group.
Yeah. It's exceedingly tough to set that up,
Hmm.
both as a rule mechanic and in an individual adventure to feel that way. And I had in fourth edition, you did too, multiple attempts to try to make a skill challenge feel that way. And it's a hard thing to do. You
Hmm.
can achieve it. I think both of us did
Hmm.
in various ways, but it is a difficult thing to do for sure.
Yeah. And speaking of difficult things to do, let's talk about negotiations. So, negotiations, as we said, is even a more mechanically inclined system for trying to get something that you want. And like skill challenges, like montages. I really want this to work.
Mm.
And I have so much trouble seeing it play really well regularly
Mm.
because there are so many facets to negotiations. There are so many facets to motivations. There are so many different ways to describe different ideas that to say, for example, that freedom would be a pitfall, right? Freedom would be a pitfall in this negotiation because they don't care about freedom in general. They only care about money and valor. So if you bring up freedom, they're going to, right, their patience will start to wear down.
Right.
But freedom means a lot of things to different people. And freedom for them is different than freedom for them, which is different for freedom for me, which is different for freedom for
freedom
you.
to freedom to sell what you want how you want to is different than freedom to
Then
be
exactly,
for everybody to
exactly.
have an income.
So to try to winnow that down into a system is valiant. It's a
Mhm.
valorous attempt. It's just so hard to make work over so many different examples.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the clock, so we only have so much time to talk about this, but let's get into
Yep.
what happened, which was this was will the woad elves let
Mhm.
us pass through a forest? So it was very kind of Lord of the Rings, this, right? You know, all of a sudden they're there holding bows, with arrows
Mhm.
pointed at your nose, and there were various arguments we could choose from. Some of them were bad to use or good to use, depending on these characteristics we've talked about in the rule of a negotiation. And we
Mhm.
failed.
Mhm.
Um, we chose bad arguments to make that they were not sympathetic to, or that were their actual pitfalls. Even though I think we were trying to think of what would work for, angry elves in a forest.
Mhm.
Um, we also just rolled poorly, and so just dice
Yeah.
went cold in a number of ways, and so it just is what it was. And so it didn't take long. I think a single, we each went like I don't know that even all of us went, and then it was over. Um,
Yeah.
and so in the end, elves did not pass us, and they told us to leave, which had a very nice consequence of we had to decide, all right, do we want to sneak around these elves, ignore the fact that they told us we can't go through the forest, or do we want to take the dangerous road? And we chose to take the dangerous road, and they'd even mentioned goblins at some point. So we suspected, oh, we'll probably fight some dangerous
Mhm.
goblins, which is what happened. Um,
Yeah.
I think what happened from a play experience for me is I had trouble figuring out what I, as a player, or my character should know about these
Mhm.
elves. I suspect that if we were much more familiar with the rules, we would have done a better job of figuring out their motivations.
Mhm.
And we didn't do that. We just were like, well, I'm good at this skill, and this sounds like it should work. Oh, look, it's a pitfall. It failed. Those things happened early on, which really hurt us, right? And so we were
Yeah.
knocked out before we could even get going.
Even when we tried to figure out their motivations, we failed those checks.
Yeah.
So we couldn't even get a bead on what they would want.
Yeah.
And so like at one point, yeah, we're like, we just want to go through here. Uh, we're just taking this medicine to this town.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we know that there are bad things in the woods because we just got attacked by ratlings. Oh, we have a rattling prisoner. Pull the prisoner out of the
Right.
wagon, throw them at the feet of the. And
We
I
thought
think
things were
even
going to go well when
Tom's
we did that. That felt good.
right, right, and I think even Tom said at that point I should have just said, "Okay, you succeed because you've proven that you are the enemy of the enemy."
Mm-hmm.
But that didn't it didn't
Then we made a
register.
roll and failed that roll. So then
Right,
it turned into
right,
like a bad thing. Yeah.
right. So it just it there has to be times and places where rules are automatic. And I think the rules might say that. At least they say it for
Yeah.
montages.
They do. Yeah. I think so. One of the things that's happening that makes this challenging to run, I think, is that your default check, right? When you make this power roll for your argument,
Mhm.
assuming there are no motivations or pitfalls, just the basics. I'm looking at the rules here. The
Mhm.
basics are you make this power roll plus reason, intuition, or presence. If you get less
Mhm.
than 11, the tier one result, or less than equal to, the NPC's patience decreases by one and their interest decreases by one. Right. So
Mhm.
both negative. 12 to
Yeah.
16, tier two, their patience decreases by one because is even what would normally be a success because time is
Right.
passing. Right. So their
Yeah.
patience is always decreasing. A
Mhm.
17 plus, their interest increases by one. So they're willing to listen to you. And their patience decreases by one because, again, time is passing. And so that's one of the tough things is you don't have
Right.
forever. You've got to really work it. And in fact, if you crit getting a 19 or 20, now the patience remains the same. So that's how there is this ticking clock. And so
Right.
you must very carefully do this. But that's where the failure, you make no ground and still time was worn out, and then you might have hit a motivation or pitfall problem, and that's where you just, if you hit a
Yeah.
pitfall, it makes it tough. And I
What's
think
great
not knowing
about
that system, it made it particularly hard to even understand how short a time we had, maybe from a
yeah.
tactical perspective, which tactics are important in this game.
Yeah. What's great about draw steal is if you roll poorly on these tests, you still do damage and
Hmm.
still do effects. But doing that check for negotiations, you are much less likely to succeed.
Yeah.
As you know, what are the chances of getting a 17 plus, even if you have a plus two presence or a plus two skill? You're
Yeah.
still only succeeding greatly a very small percentage of the time. Trying to do the math in my head. Don't try
Yeah.
this at home.
Well,
It's not likely.
and it's tough because so like motivation, right? So that was just the default of what happens.
Mhm.
If you appeal to a motivation, so if we had done maybe something related to the trouble they have with goblins or something like that, and that was their motivation. I haven't looked at the adventure. Now the way those 3-tier results work on your roll is if you fail, their patience decreases by 1, or tier 1. Tier 2, patience or their interest increases by 1 and their patience decreases by 1. But now on a 17 plus, their patience doesn't change, right? And their interest increases by 1. So appealing to motivation can help you because you don't lose on that patience
Right.
track. But the counter is a pitfall. If you use a pitfall, it automatically fails, doesn't matter what you say. And I know we did that at least once. I think my character, I thought I was being clever and I mentioned a pitfall and down it went.
Yeah.
And so that's where you both their interest and patience decreases by 1, which can make things really tough.
And whether you love a system like this or hate a system like this, if you set aside your opinion and ask the question, what could be in its place?
Mm-hmm.
Is what could be in its place much more interesting? So, what could be in its place? We're going through, these elves step out with arrows drawn and they say, Halt, what are you doing here? What would be the best story,
Mm-hmm.
right? The best story might be, if we're going to let you through, you need to do something for us first. Go off and take care of this goblin problem that we have over here. We'll guard the wagon. You go do that. Come back. We will let you through. That's exciting. That uh, keeps the story moving forward. Or something else that is narratively direct and doesn't stop the adventure for a bunch of weird rolls and discussions about what's trying.
Yeah, though I would say that that's sort of like almost like obvious, right? It's good, it's a nice story, but it's like
Right.
kind of like as a gamer, you kind of go like, "Oh, we ran into the elves. You got to have something I can do so that you let me through, right? Like, yes, go take the bucket to the person who will fill it with stuff. Oh, but they'll need you to help them, and then when you come back, you'll finally finish because you did the quest chain, and now you get to walk through." I did
Yeah.
like in this adventure that the failure then created that choice: sneak through the elves, or or
Mhm.
take on. Like I thought that part was worth it to me. That there was this interesting choice of which way to go. Um, yeah, I again suspect this whole system is one that you just need some time to figure out and
Mhm.
find your way to do it. When you talk about what else could be there, I mean, the equivalent of this in Savage Worlds Deadlands that I'm encountering, and that's quite disappointing in some ways, is there is no system.
Mhm.
And we run into an NPC, and it's great role playing. So that part's great because I happen to have a really good group, but there is no skill other than just, I forget what's called, persuasion. There's just like the skill that you use for this.
Mhm.
And so it's
Mhm.
very boring in that the number of skills you have are sort of so, it just ends up being one obvious skill you use in most situations. And so there isn't much character to the scene mechanically. The role playing of the group can carry it, but there is so little here, right? It's the contrast to
Yeah.
this.
I'm not arguing with you at all.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, is there a difference between the one check and the five checks? Right. If it's the same five checks that you have to do,
Well, I'd
uh,
say, why does the Lord of the Rings, scene with Elrond involve all of these different people discussing. Well, we get to see the character of all the different people that are at the table, who are discussing in Rivendell what should happen, and the character of the dwarf and the character, we meet these characters. And so there is that opportunity to have a richness to the scene if we have more steps and more introductions, and we don't do all the bad things, right?
Right. And so that's my question is, what if the elf says, "Who are you? Each of you tell me your name and where you're from." That gives everyone a chance to role play. And then, okay, you have a choice. You can either blank or this, or you can't go through, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I understand why this is here. I understand why this can be super fun for certain types of players. I just don't know if in the aggregate, what it's replacing is if it's better than what it would be replacing.
Mm.
Assuming a fun scene.
Yeah, we will have to try it more, I think, to know
Yeah,
that for sure. What we
sure.
can say without a doubt, from our perspectives, other people may say this is great, I figured it out, but you have to do a lot of reading to figure this one out.
Mm-hmm.
Montages, you can kind of get there pretty quickly. But it's probably the similar page count, but it's sort of a
Mm-hmm.
simpler system that might seem pretty familiar to most people. This one, you got to figure out these interest levels, the pitfalls. There are a
Yeah.
lot of components to it. And so I think becoming good at this will take more practice for the director.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where directors may say, "Oh gosh, I can't do
Yeah.
this." Right? I don't know.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
could make this sing, it may be a really sweet system for you. And again, if you can design those scenes so they feel good, as much as it was sort of a disappointing outcome, I did like the way it played out. I thought that choice at the end really made
Mm-hmm.
it fun for me, because the obvious thing would have been to say, you meet the elves, they mention goblins, you go, well, we could help you with the goblins. Okay, go do
Mm-hmm.
that. Come back. Oh, now you can
Yeah.
walk through.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I've played three. None of them have sang for me yet.
Okay.
I've written four or five. I have no idea if they're going to play well in any
Yeah,
sense
that's
of the
fair. That's
imagination.
fair. Yeah.
So, yeah, I am coming to this from a place of,
Yeah.
oh, I wish I knew how to do this well.
Yeah. Despite
But
looking all over it. Yeah.
we shall see. Another thing we'll see is what people think, because you all have heard everything we have to say about this. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate your support. We really appreciate those people who support us via our Patreon. There are some out there who are Master of Dungeon supporters. You can tell them, by their glowing charisma. Um, we also have Master of Realms supporters. You know them by their powerful beings. And the Masters of the Multiverse, you have to watch out for them, because they are none other than Agile Monk of Fantasy Companion Workshop, Keith Ammon of The Monsters Know What They're Doing, Louis Anders of Lazy Wolf Studios, Craig Bailey, Rudy Chainsaw Basso, welcome to the show, David Bastiensen, Derek the Bearded GM, Steve Bissonette, Merrick Blackman, Calvin Bridges Avalos, Brobo Ballin, Kevin Criswell, Dead Inertia DM, Evil John, Evan at Nimbleco, Will Doyle, Andy Edmonds at Nerdronomicon.com, James Fisher, Lucas G, Scott Fitzgerald Gray at Insane Angel Studios, Ben Heisler and Paige Lightman, Sean Hurst, Hyperlexic, The Jaunty Mantis TTRPG Podcast, Mark and Mary's Gaming Compound, The Mighty Jerd, JL at Tileforge, JR of The Twilight Perspective, JT Evans, Brian King, Jim Klingler, Gail Cormandy, Chad Lench, Paul Mata, the Mathemagician, Jaron from Mathis Arcanum, Eric Mengi, Anna B. Meyer of Fantasy Cartography, Trey McLemore, John Mickey, Sean Molly, Falcon Neal, Tom Nelson of the Deck of Player Safety, DT Norris of DT and Dragons, Phil Wirt from the Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo, Philip N. Lindsay, Frog Prince at Tentacles Squelching Wetly, Post Fiction RPG Audio, Ricardo Who Might Adventure, Robert Pasley, Vladimir Prenner from Croatia, Ozymandias Rex, Runner Rick, Chance Russo at Drago Russo, Andy Shockney, Krishna Simosa, Tim Smith, Spark from Dunner Games, Josh and Lee Wanika of the Tabletop Journeys podcast, Talos the Stormlord, Jeremy Talaman from the D&D and TV podcast, Tres, Ryan Truk, Joe Tyler, Marcelo de Velasquez, the Valiant DM, James Walton, Graham Ward, Jason Ward from Accidental Cyclops Games, Javier Waziak, Waterford Wizard, Chris Webster, Zach Types, and Z. Walt Winfrey. Thank you so much for your support, and thank you for listening. If you like the show, please consider supporting that Patreon at patreon.com/masteringdnd. And also, if you get the chance, leave us a review wherever you listen to this podcast, or go to YouTube and subscribe and like and comment and do all of those things that helps bump up that profile. Teos, I know you've been busy sunning yourself and now you're going to be off to beautiful Seattle, but what have you been doing on your social media?
Well, I am about to provide a video about a part of Draw Steel that I unequivocally adore, which is the complications. So you can see that on my YouTube channel.
There you go. You can find me on all the socials at Shawn Merwin. You can follow the podcast at Mastering D&D on all those same socials. You can ask us questions on our Patreon Discord. You can send that email to masteringdnd@gmail.com. Go to the YouTube, youtube.com/@masteringdungeons. We've done the show, Teos. We have drawn the steel. We have negotiated. We have montaged. What are we going to do now?
Well, I'm going to quickly submit my supplement for Draw Steel called Paul Simon's Guide to Negotiations.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to submit my love songs to Draw Steel, and then we will have both covered. They're often mistaken for one and the same, I've heard.
Yeah, no, they're different.
Mm-hmm.